Welcome to Where Are They Now, the new CUNY Startups podcast where we sit down with alumni from our startup programs and discuss their experiences, delving into their journeys, aspirations, and the unique experiences that the CUNY Startups programs have offered them. Not just to recount success stories, but also to unravel the challenges, the lessons learned, and the moments that define their entrepreneurial path. Welcome to Where Are They Now? Thank you for being here, Claudio. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Awesome. I'm great. So to start, do you want to just give me a little brief summary of your background in school and what you do now?
Yeah, just a little bit of high-level background. Grew up in Miami, eventually moved to New York to really build a career. At this point, I've been in tech roughly for around the last 8 to 9 years. At the beginning of that, I was actually attending Baruch. Ultimately, was part of the CUNY Startups program. Left that, and ever since, I basically worked at a couple of companies, including WeWork, a Series A company called Pipestream, where I did product management. And in between and all the way to today, I've always been basically launching startups and trying to push that a little bit further. Nowadays, about a year and a half ago, I moved to the West Coast to really make it happen. This is kind of the place where all the action is, especially now with AI. So yeah, just been an entrepreneur, kind of in and out. Taught myself how to code throughout that journey, and just been doing startups pretty much ever since.
Wow, that's awesome. Very impressive. So which program were you in, CUNY Startup specifically? Do you remember the year?
Man, it might have been 2017, perhaps 2018. We used to be an accelerator program. I did a pitch competition, and then just went through like the accelerator. That was, I think, a semester long.
Awesome. Do you remember how you were able to find CUNY Startups back then?
That's a good question. I don't think I do. It might have either been social media back then, or just maybe flyers posted around school. I do remember when I came across it, I just thought, like, man, like this just feels like exactly what I was hoping that my major would give me. I was majoring in entrepreneurship back then, which I eventually kind of dropped. But I was really looking more for this hands-on approach to just building companies and building startups. So yeah, when I first saw the messaging on that, again through a flyer or something, I don't remember. I was like, this is exactly what I've been looking for.
For sure. I think a lot of people have the same story with that.
Yeah.
And so do you remember what your business was in CUNY Startups?
Yeah. So a really bad startup idea, I think, our first idea. We went through two ideas during the accelerator. Originally, we were struggling with a good idea ourselves. So instead of actually coming up with a good idea, we thought, why don't we build a sort of social network that lets people suggest ideas of important things to work on. And then the best entrepreneurs can kind of like look at that and then pick the best ideas, which was kind of like I ended up actually talking to a couple of the folks at Y Combinator, Michael Seibel. I remember one of the feedback that he gave me on that was like, why are you solving a meta problem? Like, actually go and build a real startup instead of trying to solve kind of like this, almost like excuse for coming up with a good idea. So that was a really bad idea in retrospect. I think, you get better with time. And then once we got that feedback, kind of like mid program, we ended up moving towards a completely different kind of concept. And basically the insight was we were starting to conduct user interviews to learn about kind of what people needed and what was valuable. And one thing that we observed was during the process of conducting interviews, it was kind of hard to keep the team aligned on all the notes and all the insights that were coming out of all these calls and interviews that we were having. So we thought that we would kind of work on like, hey, is there a better kind of feedback management platform for like teams conducting user research and user feedback? So back then I didn't know how to code, so we ended up just kind of more building a pitch deck and kind of talking about the idea and trying to build like a no-code solution for it. Which, in retrospect, like one of the most important things you can do is just like build a product and ship it and show it to customers and get some traction that way. And, it was out of that frustration of not being able to actually build the thing. And I was trying to hire like technical people and we didn't have any money back then. So it was kind of like, come work for us for free, even though you could be using your time to actually do something, elsewhere. But it was out of the frustration of not being able to find a technical team that I just taught myself how to code. And I was like, enough is enough. I'm not gonna have any excuses as to why this didn't work. So it was in that kind of like towards the end of that accelerator program, I just kind of went heads down and pulled a ton of all-nighters, just teaching myself how to code. And at the end of it, we actually shipped, like version 1 of this feedback platform.
Wow. So you ended up coding the whole thing yourself?
Yeah, out of desperation, I was like, yeah, wow. This is the only way this is going to happen.
That's really impressive. So how did it end up doing?
It didn't go beyond the semester. So like once we wrapped up the accelerator, I think we just didn't have conviction to get any further. And I think part of the team was kind of like starting to look at other things. So you're working with students, so everyone's got their own they still have their own agenda, right? Like people want to get internships, people want to kind of continue pursuing like their career, and sometimes the program is more of a learning experience, not so much something that people feel like truly like I'm going to drop everything else and just commit to this. I don't think the other 2 co-founders that I had back then are still doing startups, but I guess I was the stubborn one that kind of just said, I'm going to keep going down this path, no matter how long it takes. And here I am, kind of like 5 startups later, having raised a ton of money and having kind of like shipped many products and gone way and way more technical. Now in Silicon Valley, kind of like just doing that kind of all in. But yeah, I guess that was the beginning of the journey of like officially kind of building something that I would consider a startup or a software product.
For sure. And do you think you took some of those lessons that you learned doing that business in CUNY Startups like on with you with other startup ventures after?
Yeah, I think I did. I don't think I appreciated it right after the program, but I think some of the stuff really stuck. So there's definitely a lot of frameworks that I think were taught during the program that I continue to like refer back to even today. Even like the basic stuff, but like how important it is to actually have a vision and a mission for your startup. How important it is to actually fill out, for example, there's this framework called like the business model canvas that just kind of like really summarizes, what is your value prop, who are you going after, how are you going to market and acquire like certain customers. And I remember there was also like, I think it was design thinking. There was an IBM kind of programming kind of embedded into the cohort, and kind of went from 0 to 1 on let's understand users, their pain points, what do they think, say, feel, and do, and what kind of products can you build to map to those pain points. So those were all kind of fundamentals that I think were taught during the program, and I continue to refer to them, even to this day, whenever it makes sense.
Sure. And did you have any lessons after in your startup career where you were like, I really wish they taught me this in CUNY Startups, or some things that you just had to learn on your own through experience?
I mean, the vast majority of things, I definitely think you just have to kind of go through it, and it's going to be really, really painful, but you have to go through those things and just, get punched in the face and get back up and figure it out. Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest overarching lesson I think is you still have to build a great product. It's not enough to have a great idea and to be able to convince others of your great idea. Like you still have to ultimately, in my case, it became, let me become technical in order to be able to actually, first of all, build it myself, and second of all, actually lead engineering teams to just build great products. Back when I was doing the program, I was attending Baruch. A lot of people from there were like, business school students. So a lot of it was like people weren't technical. They were business people. They had a great idea, and they knew how to talk about it, and they knew how to talk about markets and opportunity, and that's great. But if you're not able to actually deliver the thing that solves the problem, then you don't really have a startup. So I think you need both sides, right? You need great business thinking and great strategy, but you also need to marry that with like actually building great product. And at the end of the day, like I think one of my biggest advantages in becoming hyper technical has been in just iteration speed. It's myself and my team, like we can ship very, very fast, and we're hands-on in the code, and that's what ultimately gives you, I think, a competitive advantage. It's your ability to build products and build great experiences, faster than your competitors, faster than the big company, the current incumbent is able to respond to a certain opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that's been the difference in like your more successful ventures versus your not as lucrative ones?
I think there's a lot of luck that we try to tell ourselves usually that like we control a lot more of the variables. Like if I only try hard enough, I'll succeed. There's just so much luck going into this. My startup before the current one was actually in Web3, and I just timed the market very poorly. And we started that, and right after we started, kind of like the whole market imploded. The crypto markets collapsed. Everything, all the excitement around kind of decentralized, digital assets just completely evaporated overnight. And we weren't able to raise our follow-up round, and that was just a timing issue. I think the idea still holds and it's good, but it doesn't matter kind of how hard we would have tried. It was just not good timing. And more recently, I think with I'm currently working on an AI startup, and I think we timed the markets great, and then that's just led to an easier time fundraising and just a lot of excitement on our user base to actually just be willing to try new products that might just be built by startups. So yeah, I think it's a mixed bag. Like there's stuff that's in your control, stuff that isn't. It doesn't all depend on you. I do think the fundamentals do compound. Like if you get really good at the fundamentals, you increase your chances of success, and that's I think the lesson that I really just take with me. So yeah, I mean everything from teach yourself how to code and iteration speed. I think for example, those are the fundamentals I think I've maintained throughout every single startup, and in fact just try to get better and better and better. And then the net impact of that is looking at kind of my success rate today. I can definitely kind of go 0 to 1 much faster and skip like all the early stage stuff. Like generating revenue for us, for example, I think for a really long time was difficult. It's like, how do we build something that anyone is even willing to pay for? And nowadays, I think it's making that leap is much faster, much more intuitive, and it comes down to like you nail the fundamentals, and it becomes easier to start kind of building on top of that and getting further and further in your startup career. So I've been in this for almost a decade at this point, which is crazy to be able to say. But it does feel like every attempt that we take, we get further, and that's how I measure my success. Like, yes, it takes a freaking long time, but if you're able to look back at your previous attempts and recognize, like, am I at least kind of getting to a further stage on this current attempt versus the last, then you're making progress. You can't control the ultimate outcome, but at least you can still zoom out and see the bigger picture of like, am I trending in the right direction, and use that as I guess resilience and confidence that you should keep going, and things will eventually work out.
For sure. Yeah, taking small victories and watching your progress grow. That's good advice. So do you think for students who are trying to come up in the startup world, would you say like the same thing, like focus on the fundamentals? Like what do you think are the most important areas for students to focus on? Because it's limited resources, limited time. It's tough to focus on, balance all that type of stuff. So do you have any advice?
Yeah, I would say like for like a guiding principle, like 2 things they should always be doing, and probably the most important things are talk to your customers and build product. And if you're not doing one of those 2, then you're probably wasting your time and doing what I call like fake work. So if you're going to conferences and going to pitch competitions and giving talks, like you're actually not working on the core thing. So if you remember nothing else from this video, I think it would say like just do 2 things, like talk to your customers and build product, and do that religiously, and ultimately I guess have a way to measure your success. What is the scoreboard? For us, for example, and it probably should be for most startups, I think revenue. So if your scoreboard is at 0, if you have 0 in revenue for some time, use that as inspiration, and until that scoreboard starts moving, then you're really moving things in the right direction. And the way to achieve that again comes down to the initial 2 pillars: talk to customers and build product. If you talk to people, they tell you they have a problem, and then you build a product that solves that problem, they'll be willing to pay you for it, right? So those are really the 2 key inputs that I was focused on at all times, and I would be highly skeptical of anyone that's trying to argument as to why they should be going to conferences, why they should be taking more courses on X, Y, and Z. It's really it's not that difficult. I think just stick to the basics and just do that really, really well. And yeah, just at the end of the day, like the other thing I would say is it takes, like, building great things take time, and like if you really want to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to, I think, plan for the long term, like plan in decades, not months, not years, and commit to that. Like it really is a long journey, and it's not for the faint of heart. But if that's you, then good luck.
For sure. And how important do you think the team is in this process? Like surrounding yourself with the right team, with the right strengths?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I think there's a lot of different angles to unpack it. Obviously, teams, I think, is the most important thing. Is do you have people that you work well like together with? Like, so one part is like how well you work together as a team, and the other part I think is just like actual skill sets and experience that you bring to the table. I mean, one of the biggest challenges with I think just working with other students is frankly like none of you have industry experience usually at the beginning, and that just usually a blind spot you should be aware of. If you're trying to build for industry but you don't have industry experience, that's going to be challenging. Sometimes it's easier to build for consumer if you're young than for B2B enterprise. So that's something to keep in mind. And definitely having a team that I think is very complementary. So like, do you have enough people on your team that the way that I would balance the team is twofold. It's engineering and it's growth. Those are the really the most important things. Is can you build product? And again, can you get an enhance of customers? For my current team, we try to keep like a 50-50 balance on our inputs, on any given week. Like if you sum the total number of hours or efforts that we really put into the startup, like we try to keep it into aggressively growing the current thing while building more features, more capabilities. So so as team's super important, but I would keep it balanced, and I would definitely think of those two pillars. Do I have enough kind of core competency on growth and on engineering, and just make sure that those bases are covered, and not that you have a team of four business people kind of that can that can talk up a good game, but not quite execute on.
Got you. Well, thank you, Claudio. I think this has been really insightful. I think I learned a lot, and I think a lot of people will learn from your experiences and your advice as well. Thank you
Awesome.
again for being interviewed, and I wish you best of luck on all your startup ventures in the future.
Thanks, Ethan. Appreciate it.